Let me be brutally honest with you. You don't see many bootstrap companies that can break past the 5 million barrier in revenue. And the reason isn't effort or drive. It's that nobody in the company has ever seen what a $10 million company looks like. No one's lived through the systems, roles, decision-making structures required at scale. So everybody's improvising. And you can't build what you haven't seen. It's very difficult. That's why so many founders hit a ceiling and get stuck at what I call the hamster wheel. Always moving, but never accelerating. Many of you are working harder than ever, yet your growth is slowing. You've hit what I call the founder's plateau. That painful space, the no man's land between $1 and $5 million, where you become the very ceiling that's actually limiting your company's potential. This isn't just a theory. I've watched this happen to hundreds of ambitious founders who had everything it took to get a company off the ground and build something extraordinary, except the willingness to get out of their own way. The 1 to 5 million dead zone is where good companies stagnate. How many of you have hit a revenue number and just stayed there month after month in spite of your best efforts? This isn't sustainable, and it's certainly not scalable. What got you to 1 million probably won't get you to 10 million. The scrappy, multi-hat wearing team that hustled alongside you in the early days simply can't build the infrastructure required to truly scale. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You're actually probably the bottleneck. Every decision waits for you. Every significant client issue escalates to you. Every strategic initiative depends on your bandwidth. Your calendar is probably a testament to this problem. I bet it's filled with tactical meetings that should literally be handled by somebody 1 or 2 levels below you. This is the hamster wheel that I talk about. Constant motion, but with diminishing progress. So what's the #1 fatal hiring mistake that almost every founder makes? When I ask founders about their hiring strategy, I typically hear something like this. We're looking for the best talent that we can afford. Well, stop right there. This is the mindset that's precisely what's keeping you trapped. You're making hiring decisions based on your current revenue and not your target revenue. You're building the team you can afford today instead of the team that's going to get you where you want to go. Ever wonder how a private equity-backed or a publicly traded company operates at scale? Or how a venture-backed startup can grow so fast? It's not magic, it's hiring. These companies almost always bring in senior leaders who are already doing the job at scale rather than betting on an affordable up-and-comer or the person that's been with you since day one. And these roles rarely show up on job boards. Instead, these companies actively recruit proven operators out of other high-performing organizations, often using internal or external recruiters. Now, do these hires cost more? 100%. But you've eliminated one of the biggest risks in hiring somebody, whether or not they can do the job. And you know why they can do the job? Because they're already doing it. Let me reframe this completely. Your most strategic investment isn't marketing, technology, or product development. It's executive talent that has already been where you want to go. Now that was the #1 fatal hiring mistake. What's the #2 hiring mistake? It's the interview process itself. Another common mistake is how founders approach the interview process. You know, when you're trying to get something off the ground, you're trying to find out if somebody can do this, that, or the other thing. But when you're hiring a senior level talent, yes, of course you need to assess cultural fit and whether or not they can do the job and if they're aligned with your mission. But just as important, half the interview needs to be you selling them. You know why? Because top performers aren't actively looking for a job. They're already winning somewhere else. So if you want them to leave a great position and take a chance on your company, you have to make a compelling case for why it's worth it. So what are the real economics of hiring senior leadership? Yes, I'm suggesting you consider executives who might command salaries that feel astronomical relative to your current payroll. I've had founders physically recoil when I suggest they need to make a $250,000 hire when their next highest paid employee makes $90,000 a year. But let's break down the actual economics. When you hire somebody who's been a VP at a $25 million company, you're not just getting their skills. You're acquiring the organizational DNA of successful scale. You're importing proven systems, processes, and judgment that took years to develop elsewhere. And when you hire a really senior person, these leaders don't need you to explain what good looks like. They already know. They don't need you to create the roadmap. They'll build it for you. They don't need you to monitor their work, they'll exceed your expectations without supervision. This isn't just an expense, it's leverage. And leverage is what creates escape velocity from the hamster wheel that you've been trapped in. I worked with a founder who hesitated for 18 months before hiring a true COO at a $300,000 annual income. In the first quarter after that hire, operational efficiency, shockingly, improved by 22%, and the founder claimed more than 20 hours a week, which in turn allowed the founder to focus more on growth versus making the trains run on time. And so by year's end, the business had grown by 40% with fewer crises, less founder involvement than ever before. That salary wasn't a cost. It was the highest ROI investment in the company's history. Now, when I work with bootstrap CEOs and founders, I constantly hear, "But I tried hiring senior people and it didn't work." I hear this objection every time. And here's my challenge back to those guys. You didn't hire senior enough. When you hire somebody who still needs significant guidance, who still creates more questions than answers, who still hasn't built and led a function at scale, you haven't hired a true executive. You've hired a manager with a fancy title. True executives don't just execute tasks. They transform organizations. They don't just solve problems. They prevent them. They don't just manage teams. They build capabilities. If onboarding takes months, you didn't hire high enough. You didn't invest enough. The right hire likely knows more than you do about operating at scale. They'll tell you what needs to happen, not the other way around. Let me tell you about Jamie. He cycled through 3 senior product leaders in 2 years. None of them delivered the product evolution he needed. Why? He'd hired people from companies at the same scale as his, $3 to $4 million in revenue. So they were stuck at the same stage he was. Eventually, Jamie convinced a VP of product from a $50 million competitor to join his mission. And guess what? Within weeks, that exec reorganized the product team, implemented proper road mapping, aligned engineering with business priorities, and by the way, also helped a bunch of other different functional areas of the company with the experience, processes, and systems that he was bringing from that larger company. This wasn't incremental improvement. This was absolute transformation. So, how do you reframe the risk, the true cost of underhiring? I understand the fear. Making a $250,000 to $300,000 hire when you're only at $2 million in revenue probably feels terrifying. Founders lose sleep over this. They worry about morale, payroll, optics, and frankly, just paying for it. But here's the reframe. If it's the wrong hire, you're probably gonna know very quickly, probably within 30 to 60 days. If you know that fast, what's your actual exposure? Maybe 1 month's salary, 2 months' salary, including severance? That's your option price. Now consider the alternatives. Well, what if you spend the next 3 years stuck at 3 million? What's the opportunity cost of stagnation or burnout, of watching your competitors scale while you tread water? Here's how you know you've made the right hire. There's a moment I love watching founders experience. It's when their new executive says, "I've got this. You don't need to be in these meetings anymore." Or sometimes it's even like, "Get out of my face and let me do my job." I've heard that too. At first, it probably feels threatening, but soon, trust me, it becomes the most liberating feeling you've had since you started the company. One client called it having air in my lungs for the first time in years. Another said, "It finally feels like there's an adult in the room besides me." In other words, I've got a true business partner. And yet a third sent me a vacation photo, their first vacation in 3 years, with an empty inbox and the caption that read, "This is what freedom feels like." So, when you have this kind of freedom, you start thinking strategically again, you rediscover why you started this in the first place. And best of all, you start driving real enterprise value. This is the mindset shift from operator to architect. Here's the transformation I'm asking you to make. Stop thinking about headcount costs. Start thinking about capability investments. Stop hiring for potential. Start hiring proven performance. Stop settling for who applies for the job and start recruiting who you need. And stop managing tasks and start building systems. And lastly, stop being the ceiling and start being the foundation. One truism in business is the entrepreneur who builds to 1 million is rarely the same who builds to 10 million. The difference? The 10 million version knows their job is assembling exceptionally talented people who make their involvement increasingly unnecessary. You must give up the dopamine hit of solving problems. Replace it with a deeper satisfaction of building an organization that solves them without you. You need to focus from hero to hero maker, from player to coach, from firefighter to fire marshal. I've helped hundreds of founders make this shift. It's never easy, but no one has ever regretted it. The most common feedback? Dang, I wish I'd done this sooner. So what's your next move? The question that changes everything. As you wrap this up, ask yourself one question. Who is the one executive hire that would transform your ability to scale? Not who you can afford, not who seems attainable. Instead, who would genuinely change the game? Write down their title, write their experience, their capabilities, the problems they'd solve, the outcomes they'd own, and make them real. And then go find that person. Not next year, not when you feel ready, but now. Because now is when you need them most, when it feels impossible. That one hire may be the difference between staying stuck and scaling with velocity. Look, no founder ever scaled to 10 million by doing it all themselves. They got there by hiring better people, by making investments before they felt ready, by choosing to build a company they wanted, not settling for the one they had. So I say this to you. Are you ready to make the commitment? Because on either side of that decision is the business you set out to build and the life you actually want to live.